Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this session. We are doing this with Conduct, Springworks and Conduct, a session on sort of diversity and inclusion 101. And who better to do this than the good folks at Conduct? I think I have never met you, Pallavi, in real life, but I have followed you for a very, very long time. And of course, Alisha, now I've known you for the past 2 weeks. And I think, what you folks are doing is outstanding, superb. And I'll now hand it over to you to introduce yourself and what Conduct is. Pallavi, please go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much, Abhash. And so proud and so thrilled to be doing this together because for Springworks, for Conduct, I think what we are building is how to put the employees first in workplaces. I know customers as being worshipped as gods for as long as I can remember whenever we start talking about companies. But when we talk about building organizations, you have to put the spotlight on employees. And that's the common philosophy that all of us sitting here have, that how do we actually put that spotlight on employees? That's what Ungender as well as Conduct as a product has been up to. Now, Conduct for us is a mammoth task because the minute you start talking about putting a structure and standardization on something as ambiguous as feelings and experiences and the environment, all these things, elements have been very subjective and very non-calculative for as long as we can remember. So with Conduct, what we have put together and what we are building is actually putting numbers to these experiences. To when we say culture, can we actually quantify what that culture is and then further qualify it? Because until and unless you know where you have reached or where you are starting from, how will you even decide how far you want to go, right? So that quantifiable metric, whenever we start talking about putting safety at first and inclusion at first, what do we mean when we say diversity is what Conduct is working on. Rest, I'm sure Alisha will have more plugins to talk about.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, it's interesting to me that, you're putting a number to this because not just, what gets measured gets improved, that sort of stuff, but also because, many a times the sort of, especially in tech companies, they are very much focused on numbers. So just quantifying it, I think will improve that as well. Alisha, over to you. Introduce yourself, please.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining in. And thank you, Abhash, for the kind introduction. I'm Alisha. I head growth at Conduct. And I am actually a qualified lawyer, but I have sort of made the switch to legal technology products. And it's very interesting. I think just adding a little bit to what Pallavi said, when we speak about, diversity, workplace safety, inclusion, one of the most common reactions we get, specifically when we take our product to the customers, is it's a very vague concept, right? How are you trying to put this into a product, and how are you going to, make sure that this product is going to work for our company? But I think, data is so important in the times we live in, and that is the whole idea we want to bring in, that we'll give you data, and we will make these vague concepts more workable for you, for your organization, and indirectly this is going to benefit your employees. And I think with even our collaboration with Springworks, the idea is the same, that Conduct and Springworks both work towards putting employees first in every organization. So really looking forward to this, and letting our viewers and everybody attending the webinar know that how is it that they start looking at diversity and inclusion for their teams.
Great. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. At Springworks, of course, employee well-being, the paramount importance. Sometimes I am like, Karthik Mandavil who is by the way, the CEO of Springworks. Aren't you a little too obsessed with that? Like sometimes, you seem like you've hit the best that you can do for employees, and then he comes up with some new initiative. So that's where we also saw a real way for us to collaborate, because I think very, very clear alignment there on those aspects. Cool. Let's get started. Diversity and Inclusion 101. So we will start first with what exactly is diversity, and more importantly, what does inclusion mean? Because I think I was just saying this to Alisha before we started the meeting, that, mostly I think people understand diversity, at least they have a good idea of what it is. but inclusion is something, they might not have a clarity on.
Right. So I will just go first and
Yes,
then I
please.
will let Pallavi sort of take over. And because, continuing from what we spoke of the employee experience in a workplace, a lot of places, and when you see the mainstream conversation on inclusion, whether it is through blogs, it's through different, HR leaders and all of that, they speak about organizations implementing inclusion for their employees. They speak about what it means that, how can I as an organization make my employee feel safe, secured, included, and, have this sort of psychological safety within the organization. But I think let me reverse it a little bit to make our attendees understand what inclusion means for an employee, because I think there is a lot of literature we have spoken of, and obviously we will be coming to how organizations implement it. But it's very important to understand who is benefiting from inclusion in a workplace and how an employee sees it. And as an employee, let's say for me as an employee, inclusion definitely means that I feel secure and I have the psychological safety in terms of my workplace. That when I come to a workplace, there will be no pinpoint at me irrespective of the background I come from, or if I'm not good at a certain language, or specifically when we speak about India, right, we all speak multiple languages, and right now we have something known as, English is a common accepted term. But let's say somebody who's not that comfortable with English, but in spite of that, that does not stop them from having certain skills in the workplace. They come in their workplace for their particular skills, and in spite of that, we make them feel included. We are actually, consistently helping them work on their skills, improve in the workplace, and telling them that, hey, it's okay, you don't know everything, I don't know everything, but let's work together and build something, which is for the greater good of the organization, which helps you personally, which helps you professionally. And when we speak about inclusion, the biggest thing for an employee is psychological safety, that they do not feel left out. They do not feel that, because of my shortcomings, or because I may not be like the majority in the organization, I am sort of, not included within this organization, or I don't feel part of the group. And organizations are not homogeneous. Diversity definitely means that we all come with our own experiences. We are belong to different age brackets. So inclusion means that this non-homogeneous group, comes together and feels a part of one greater cause, one greater purpose within the organization. I think over to you, Pallavi.
Yeah, thanks, Alisha. I just want to quickly quantify the diversity part also here. Sadly, for as long as we have been talking about diversity, we've all, like, even if you ask any organization right now, what's your diversity? The first thing that they will do is they will look at the number of people, humans who look like women, and the number of people who look like men, and then tell you this is our diversity. There are close to 36 plus metrics of diversity that can exist in an organization at any given point in time. The question is, are we asking for those metrics or not? Right? From the element of yes, gender is one, sexuality is second one, right? Person with different ability, persons with disabilities, third one. We know these obvious one, but there's so many hidden metrics that we are not even looking at right now. The living environment that we have, am I living alone or am I living with elderly? Am I living with family? Am I living with children? What is my working condition that supports me, especially in the remote team environment? What is the working environment that I am operating from? My job role, the degree of external communication versus the degree of internal communication, whether I have lived in one place my entire life or I have actually lived in multiple places at different duration of my life. So many attributes that are answering the question, what makes this person's need unique or different from what is needed for Alisha to grow, for what is needed Abhash to grow, and what is needed for Pallavi to grow. That is the question that we are answering when we are asking ourselves, what is our diversity? Right? So that's where the framework or the journey starts. When we say inclusion, inclusion is just simply that the minute I know what is the different need of these three people right now and 3,000 or 30,000 people, then you are able to put them into different buckets. That's when you are saying that what do I need to create for this segment, this bucket to grow and flourish? What do I need to create for this bucket to grow and flourish? That's where we are saying equity is being considered. And inclusion is that when you have provided for what is needed, we are thriving, we are growing. Whatever our unique aspects are not limiting our growth. That no, Pallavi cannot grow because she is different, or Abhash cannot grow because Abhash is different. That's where the entire journey of diversity, equity, and inclusion gets complete. And I know at some point we'll be talking about if it's a one-time activity or not. It's a daily thing that you are doing. You cannot just say that once we know it and it's done, because your diversity is shifting on an everyday basis, depending on the kind of growth trajectory that you are.
Yeah. Pallavi, you rightly said, when we talk about diversity, we mostly look at this gender. I mean, that's what 95% of the organizations are doing at this point. And I totally agree with you. Like, there are several ways to look at diversity, but where does organization start, right? Because where I'm coming from is, and very much from a devil's advocate sort of perspective, if you tell them, oh, you should not, okay, someone has agreed to start looking at that, and then you tell them, oh, it's not just gender, here are 30 other things that you need to take care of, right? It can be overwhelming. While it is the correct thing to do and the ideal thing to do, how do you think you should get started with it? Because really, in the realm of diversity and inclusion 101, right, where do organizations start if they have nothing of that sort in place at this point?
Abhash, I completely agree with you. On a day-to-day basis, whenever we do these DEI audits, or even the pulse that we are, rolling out, I know there are a lot of organizations will come back and they will ask, but where do we start? You can't do everything. Think of it as becoming healthy, right? Whenever you think of becoming healthy, you have so many aspects that you have to take care of. You have to take care of your sleep pattern, what you eat, maybe need a dietitian also, or a health counselor to come on board. Maybe you will have to start buying certain kind of things, and there is a limitation on the budget, on the time, on the effort that you'll put in. You prioritize. You Once you know what is the bucket, what you start doing it, where are the maximum number of people sitting in which bucket, right? You start with that, and whichever buckets you are not able to touch base on, that's where the strategy part comes in, wherein you say that okay, we should communicate to them, because you cannot just ignore them, right? You cannot say that, oh, right now our diversity is focusing more on, let's say, ageism, and it's focusing more on people with different gender and sexual spectrum. So we are just going to focus on that's something that you're picking up as a priority, maybe let's say for the next 2 years. But what about the rest? You're not going to stop hiring. You're also not going to tell them that you do not matter. So you communicate there that, okay, what is the bare minimum you can still start taking care of to keep that balance alive? So prioritization is very important. How do you want your definition, or how do you want your organization to be defined? And I mean, recently we always present this diversity profile statement that when you say who are we from a diversity perspective, what should define you? What particular definition that you're looking for, and that's where you start from.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, which is a big philosophical question, right? Who are you is mostly answered by what I do. And that, I think, is very, very limiting. But Alisha, you mentioned in your answer for this about language. And I wanted to bring this very interesting thing that happened on Twitter just a couple of days ago. I don't want to name the company, but a product manager from this company, which is Decacorn, posted like sort of this thread on the job description for a role, for a PM role that they are hiring for. And apart from the fact that many of those traits looked toxic to people, obviously, some of the things were written in Hindi. And, people were very quick to point out that how do you expect, are you expecting people, all of the people who are reading this, to know Hindi, or are you expecting people who only speak Hindi to apply for this job? So I think there are these subtle things which people don't even think about. They just take it for granted, right?
Absolutely, Abhash. And I think it's so interesting you bring up job description. And I think that a post, I think everybody in the startup community in India has kind of seen it. And that is one thing, like when I saw it personally, having read it, one of the first things I realized was that, coming back to the later traits about the workplace and, only specifically speaking about language, there is one aspect that particular post had Hindi, but if you see that, within the startup community in India, or, just younger companies, or even maybe the older companies, enterprises, a lot of times when you see job descriptions, you start seeing that, there are certain specific words that come into use. Like, for example, I know, I'm sorry if anybody in the attendees does not speak English, I mean, sorry, Hindi, or understand Hindi, but to give an example, you will often see words like, hatke, jugadu, or something of that sort in job descriptions. And organizations often struggle to understand that this is the first step where they start excluding people, right? Like, for example, I come from a part of India where there is no relation to Hindi. I see these words, and my first thing is I don't even understand them. So, should I be applying for this particular position? And when we put somebody in that position, that becomes a position of exclusion. And that is a very, very important step most organizations need to start understanding. Coming back to the DEI audits Pallavi spoke about, working with organizations over the course of time, we have realized that these are the things a lot of places we don't look at. Employee experience is one thing, but when we speak of hiring people who will be becoming our employees in the future, there is this element of exclusion that often comes across. Adding on to the language aspect, because I have, transitioned from a legal background, a very, very common practice that most law firms, you may have seen, I don't know if anybody from our audience or anybody here has come across, is that they have certain criteria that you need to be among the top 10 law colleges in India. Why is that a criteria? I mean, how, this, if practically speaking, the legal education in India is standardized by the Bar Council of India. So irrespective of whichever law college you study in, you're studying the same kind of syllabus. So why is this distinction there, that you want only from this particular, top 10 law colleges in India? Or, even for tech jobs, you see that, you need to be from certain IITs, or you need to be from a certain bits or something of that sort. And when we start speaking about these things, when we speak about inclusion, it's also important to remember, how are we excluding? To know that, how do we start including? And again, coming back to your previous question of how do you start, I think a very important factor here is to also assess how we are excluding, to know how we can start including. So when we start looking at our job descriptions, or we start looking at our workforce, and we see that this is a problem, okay, maybe pick up gender, which is the most common thing, and we realize that gender ratio is not that good. So that is where we are identifying, okay, maybe this is how we are excluding, and maybe this is how now we need to start including. So, kind of reverse, go back and understand what is not happening, to set up what is happening within an organization.
Got it. Got it. Pallavi, when you speak with founders, or someone in the upper echelons of management, I'm pretty sure you will not get buy-in 100% of the time, right? And so this might be an important understanding for even the attendees, right? How do you get someone to give you the buy-in that you even need something like diversity and inclusion? I mean, many companies do understand, at least the bigger Fortune 500, Fortune 5000 companies, those sort of companies, it's almost a mandate at this point, right? It's a must have. But companies that are just growing, or well, they will come back to you and say, this does not fit into our priority of things, right? We have 100 other things to take care of. How do you get them to buy in into DEI initiatives?
Yeah, thankfully, Abhash, we're living in a world which is so beautifully and sometimes painfully synchronized with each other, that everybody is noticing even the smallest thing that is coming out of any brand. no matter whether they are a 10-member team or they are a 500-member team. I don't want to drag the previous conversation. Even if you're an established brand and a big team, everybody is reading what you're communicating, even if they are customers of yours or they are not your customers. Either way, people are watching. Second, people are very vocal about whenever you actually fumble on these things, and they will highlight it. They will hold you accountable for it. um, you may, as a brand, you may not be able to calculate the loss, but what will happen is, right now everybody knows that you might become a case study of things not to do, and that will stay because we have such limited case studies in India, sadly. Or once again, I don't know if it's a good thing, bad thing. We have such limited case studies that if ever tomorrow somebody has to say what not to do, that name will come up. Or if somebody wants to talk about what are the good things that you can do, that name will come up, right? So these days, founders are already conscious of that. That's one. Second thing that happens is the concern is coming from the effort and the cost that will go in it, right? Which is a very painful thing. I completely get it. I've been a DEI professional for 20 years now. I'm telling you, it is a tedious process. It's not like you take a pill and suddenly you have six-pack abs. You don't become DEI overnight like that. But that's what our commitment is also, and our work together is also with Springworks and us coming together, right? That how do we show it to them that yes, it is something that you can start, which will run as a silent process in the background, and you will be able to see visible outputs of it. You will be able to see how there are shifts happening in your culture and how people change the narrative of how they talk about you. But for that, you have to bring both the things down. You have to bring the time effort down, and then you have to bring the monetary part also down, because that's our narrative that we are looking at shifting also. DEI should not be a luxury. We
Mm,
want to shift this from a luxury element to a necessity.
correct.
You don't wait to become DEI. I know somebody was who had come in asking, Lena was saying, right, for the small team part, that when you think of yourself as a lean team, and we are a lean team as well, Lena, so just letting you know, when you're thinking of yourself as a lean team, which a lot of startup founders are, you have to just show them, one, it is going to be simple. Second, it's not going to cost them that much. And third, there is going to be a standardized process. So from a person driven to how do you make it a system driven thing is what our attempt is, as we came together also to bring Conduct and everything else that Springworks has been doing. I'm sure you faced the same challenge when you were bringing it to
100%.
founders, that because employees have not been in the focus for the longest time. So suddenly when you say that, hey, put your time and effort towards it. So that's there. And you're right about that. It's not always an easy one. It's not as if that there is a queue outside our virtual office, that there's no waiting list. This is not something for which people are signing up in the waiting list, but that time will come, because look at the number of people who are here. 2 years ago, maybe five would have shown up, right? So times are changing, because people are asking this now. Employees, team members are asking it. For the same post, some people appreciated, like maybe 10 people appreciated, 90 actually did not appreciate it and were highlighting that, hey, this is something which is reflecting of what kind of team I would become part of, and I don't want to do that. So saying no is something that is also getting recognized subconsciously by the founders. And the third thing that I always tell them, because nobody has limited their customers, right? You may limit your team internally. You may say that we don't care about the diversity of our team, but every founder cares about the diversity of the customer segment.
100%.
Nobody can say that we will only target them. So if you are actually building only for men, sure. If you're building only for women, sure. If you're building only for people sitting in Jaipur, sure, or metro cities, sure. But you're not. So the minute you actually expand the horizon of who you're building your product for, you need to have those same representations in the boardroom, thinking things through, so that your communication and your messaging and your product can be created for that audience. So these three things usually work.
Yeah. No, very rightly you brought this up. I read this somewhere that people are when we say great resignation, and I think now everyone understands what that is. I think that's the wrong term to use. It's more like great reimagination. Like people have gotten enough time to take relook at their priorities in life. Like why should work be the priority, and then you build your life around it rather than being the other way around. And this is, of course, the workplace culture, employee well-being, how they are treated at the workplace. All of this has taken that much more importance. And I think that for those reasons also, this has come into the forefront at
Because
this.
nothing is enough anymore. No, Abhash, sorry to cut you here, but earlier we used to have carrots, then we painted them with silver, then we painted them with gold. Now we have diamond studded carrots, and people are still leaving organizations, right? And still not staying. And that brings us, I think we have crossed the Maslow's hierarchy to a different level. Maybe we need to
Correct.
come up with a new one. Let's work on that after this webinar. But people are asking for something which they were not asking for before. There's a different I think that's a great realization.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know that what do we actually need if we want to grow and be part of an organization.
Correct. Correct. Okay. Coming back to DEI itself, as in we are talking about DEI, but what sort of mandates, almost, I'm not talking about the nice to haves, the must haves, when you work with any company, right? You have got buy-in, of course. That's why you're working with them. What are sort of the must haves that you ask them to take up once you get started with them?
Yeah, so I'll just highlight some of the top things, and then
Sure,
Alisha can
sure,
complement it.
sure, sure.
So first and foremost is to actually, have a list. When I say have a list, that means that if, as much as possible, if you can go back to the data that you're collecting from your employees and actually start putting it in a sheet or in a space where you can keep track of who your people are. Second will be great to
Sorry to
actually.
cut you, Pallavi. Many a times there is not even data collection happening.
I know. I'm
That's
getting
the
to that part.
reality.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
sorry.
getting to that part.
Yeah,
I'm getting to that part. But even so, you will not know what you don't have till you start looking for it, right? So these are the blind spots in the organization. I'll give you an example. We asked for employee list and employee details from this organization, and the only thing that they could provide us was the names and the email address, and then the gender, of course, because everybody is collecting that. They never bothered giving any other option beyond the binary for the gender, right? So every time you ask an organization the gender spectrum, they will only tell you that, okay, we have these many men, these many women. We don't have any other. You don't have any other because you are not even asking.
correct.
But you will not know this part till the time you actually sit with that Excel sheet in front of you. And at least thankfully, Alisha has an economics background. So I'm glad that with legal thing, she's also fascinated with Excel sheets and data and everything else. Because that what you have will show you what all you don't have. The hiring patterns, the colleges where person is coming from, the previous company that you have pulled them out from or poached them from. All these things will start telling you the kind of hiring decisions you have been making, and will give you more and more information about not just the people there who are there in your team right now, but it will also tell you how you have been picking these people. So I know this is not part of today's conversation, but every hiring decision is also being influenced by some kind of bias that we have as the decision makers. It's not as if that we landed up with this kind of talent pool that we have in the organization. Subconsciously, consciously, you have been playing at some bias. It may be good, it may be bad, not a topic for discussion today, but that's what you discover. So just seeing what all you have collected about your team members, your employees, will tell you what all you still need to collect. That's one which is very important. Second, you really need to look at whoever your people are. Please revisit the policies, because especially in startups, Abhash, what's happening is everything is happening at a very philosophical level. We are a family. Okay, we care for everybody. We don't have any what employee leaves identified. People are free to take leaves whenever they want to leave. The thing is, as long as you're a small team, you can still communicate with each and every person. Even the 15th member or the 20th member that will come, maybe you will still have time as a founder to sit with that person, spend 20-30 minutes and tell them that, hey, this is the kind of work environment you have stepped into. But after some time, it's only your policies and processes which have been standardized that people will start looking at. Imagine your 399th employee. You're not going to have time to sit with that person and tell them that how much you care. So put the policies and certain practices in place which anybody can have access to. So even if you missed out on communicating it, at least they will have a reference document that they can look at. And then the third thing, which we always say that you should be able to put in place, please let go of this open door policy. This open door policy doesn't exist. It's very nice to say that there's an open door policy. Subconsciously, the hierarchy of power and authority is always at play. People will always think twice before coming and telling you something which is not right as per their experience. Create anonymous assistance vertical, or create some space where people should be able to talk to some other authority instead of the founder or the main leader, whoever that authority is significant of in the organization. Very important to create another channel of formal communication rather than thinking or believing that we have an open door policy, or my first 20 employees were able to come and tell me, so my 400th employee will also and should also be able to do that. It doesn't work like that. So these are some basic hygiene overview aspects that we tell them, but there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done for that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I just wanted to bring up this point of, we are a family. Like, nothing pisses me off more than when I see that, because mostly they are trying to hide, many other things that they do in the guise of saying, we are a family. Our organizations are not supposed to be families, right?
Yeah.
In a family. Yeah, I have a family, and I am already letting go of their mistakes, overlooking their mistakes every day. I'm not going to do that in a company, in an organization, right? If you don't perform, you're gone, you're out, you're fired. I don't fire my sister for, doing something wrong. That's just BS. Or worse still, in many cases, the whole upper management itself is family. So that could be the case. But I had to interject because this is one of those pet peeves that I have. But yes, Alisha.
Yes. Absolutely. Sorry, Alisha, just wanted to add. You know what? Families don't know boundaries, Abhash. Families,
exactly.
I mean, maybe there are some, nice families which have understood this concept. Families don't understand boundaries. Families are very intrusive. Families trespass all the time. If that has changed, sure, be a family. But there's already a family. The entire work and family divide, work and personal life divide can only happen if they are not trespassing on each other's territories.
Right. Yeah. So I think, Pallavi, you have, told, just want to build up on this boundaries part, and coming to the question Abhash asked about mandates. When we speak of mandates, there are two things. The distinction is in two parts. One is the policies an organization has, and the other thing is the practices an organization has. Now, some of these practices do not necessarily come under the policies. For example, we just spoke about having boundaries. Boundaries is something you have to actively practice within an organization to sort of inculcate it with everybody. So it starts from, the first employees, maybe the founder, right? And then we say that, there are, unlimited leaves off, these many leaves off, ye hai, wo hai. If somebody is taking 2 hours, working from home, if we have to step out, taking 2 hours to do some personal work, then that's where boundaries sort of, come into place. And we say that, hey, we should respect this person's time off. This is a very simple mandate most organizations need to start implementing, is that if we need to respect this person's time off, we need to respect that person's time off, period. There is no coming around or, going around that thing. Second thing is talking about actual mandates. Now, this is something because we consult with a lot of organizations in it, pulling out the data and having these mandates in place. Number one is, starting with your policies. So this includes having a policy where you're addressing forms of workplace misconduct, right? You can have There are different types of harassment. Obviously, sexual harassment in India falls under the mandate of the posh law, but you have different sort of other mandates, such as, there is peer pressure, power pressure. Now, all of this may not come under the purview of any particular law, but as a workplace, you need to start looking at it. You need to start thinking that, hey, I need to have a policy where somebody is able to report this in the workplace, right? Coming to something like, maternity benefit, right? There is a law for it, but most organizations now want to extend it to, same sex partners, or they want to extend it to people who are becoming fathers. They want to extend it when somebody's adopting or you're having a child via surrogacy. In such a case, very, very important that you start looking at putting these policies in place, because having these policies has a major effect in building psychological safety for your employees, which I spoke of earlier, right? Like, as a woman, if I'm coming into an organization and they say that, hey, this is the maternity, benefit policy of my organization, I feel that, when that, if I do have to avail of that policy, I will never, think that, oh, will it affect my career? Or, will taking that break have that effect on my career? Will I be asked to resign or something of that sort? So having strong stands, strong policies also puts your organization and your culture in a positive light for anybody coming in, and also for anybody who is a part of it and will like to avail of it further. So, one is, wherever possible, have the policy interventions, create your policy. I know that, a lot of people will have the question, ki, how do we create a policy? How do we know our employees need this policy? So Pallavi rightfully mentioned, have these forums where people are sort of, speaking about their requirements.
Right.
Secondly, very important to constantly be in communication. So have surveys, like for example the DEI pulse that Springworks and Ungender is rolling out, right? Where your employees are able, or you're telling your employees that, tell us what you want, right? Nobody, a lot of people may not come forward and say directly that, hey, this unlimited PTO thing is not really working out, because every time I want to take a PTO, I feel guilty that, oh, I took one 15 days back and I'm taking one now. So, so saying you have unlimited PTO when you started the organization and 2 years later you're continuing with the same thing, does not really make sense as you grow as an organization also. So create channels for communication with your employees where they are able to tell you what exactly they want. And when you have this data, it's much more easier for leaders also to make decisions that, hey, okay, the women in the organization are saying that the maternity benefit for them should be a certain way. Or, people in the organization are saying that the insurance should be extended to same sex partners as well. The insurance, pandemic times, right? Very essential. A lot of people told their organizations that extend insurance for COVID treatment, because that's happening to us, that's happening to our policies. So create the channel, and once you create a channel, you have the data comes in, and when you have the data, it's much easier to set up a mandate. And secondly, coming to the ones where you cannot set up mandates, like boundaries or biases, in such events, it's important to identify these and start creating an awareness channel for your employees, right? I think last week when I was speaking to somebody who was looking to adopt Conduct, they told me a very interesting perspective that people, when it comes to startups or organizations, a lot of these things are not a part of our formal education,
Correct.
right? Like, I don't know that, oh, I have a bias, but my college is not telling me that. Or, whichever place I was at earlier, they are not telling me that. So, somewhere, as leaders, there is a slight onus on them that we need to start making our team members aware of the culture we want to adopt and the sort of practices we want to adopt. And when it comes to understanding biases, when it comes to understanding diversity, like diversity also comes under different things, right? How do I have more inclusive meetings? How do I use more inclusive language, right? Like, I don't assume people's pronouns and all of that. So don't expect organizations or your employees to know this, or they read it somewhere and they come. Create that awareness channel, so the small things which are not a part of your mandate are also getting covered, and people are having this outlet to learn about it. So
Correct.
I think this pretty much covers, your basis when it comes to introducing mandates within your organization.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. Over communication is very, very important. In fact, that is one of our culture tenets at Springworks. It's are on the side of over communication. And this is something that I keep repeating. In software, there is this concept of dry, right? Do not repeat yourself because you don't want your code to bloat up. But in culture or anything of this sort, the mandate is cry, which doesn't sound like a very nice acronym, but it is constantly repeat yourself. You will have to keep repeating yourself again and again, because you can't expect, if you have 200, 400 employees to all, get it on day one. So yeah, very important. Take a quick pause here, ask everyone to, start putting in your questions in the chat box. I think our discussion will last another 10 minutes, the topics that we wanted to cover. And then we want to take all of your questions, Pallavi, Alisha, they will try to answer all of your questions. I think, has someone asked a question? Oh, yes. Yes, I think we have started getting questions. That's great. By the way, again, not many people have their videos on, so there is no way for the speakers to know whether they are being valuable. So if you think, you're getting value out of this conversation with that we are having with Pallavi and Alisha, just put a yes, or, give us like a thumbs up, a react, something, so that the speakers know, right? They have no other way to know. So just put it in the chat or react and all of that. By the way, how many of you are either on, as in your workspace is on Slack or Microsoft Teams? And I will tell you why I'm asking that. Just put it in the chat box if you are on Slack or Microsoft Teams, as in your workspace, where you do. Oh, great, great. Looks like many people are on Slack. I'm assuming, Sohan, yes means you are either on Slack or Microsoft Teams. Great. So we will tell you more about it towards the end. And of course, we'll send it across in the email also that we will send out after the session ends. Cool. Yeah, I think we have activity. Great. So yeah, just put in your questions there. Shweta from our team is, curating all the questions, as in, putting them together at one place. So we will be taking it all at the same time towards the end. Great. Now the next question is, we have defined these mandates, right? There are some must-haves, there are nice-to-haves. How does the size of the organization decide? Do the must-haves change depending on the stage of the organization, size of the organization? And I'm guessing, bigger organizations have both must-haves and nice-to-haves. But how does that differ in terms of the size and stage of the organization?
Yeah, easier question to answer, Abhash here, because for bigger organization, that means they have much more deep-rooted subconscious practices that have already gotten established. So first you will have to uproot. So think of it as a poorly made road, you'll have to first pull out everything and then lay down the fresh elements there.
So you're saying it's somehow easier for younger organizations
Yeah,
to?
absolutely, absolutely. The practices have not yet set in. The subconscious principles have not yet gotten established. There is no single trait. If you ask them what kind of culture it is, they haven't really been decisive on what kind of culture they want to build, because they haven't really spent time. The priority is different there, right? So it's think of it like this. At this age, if you, me, and Alisha were to go for a health checkup, there were so many things. Maybe we would be asked to quit certain habits that are deteriorating us, our mandate of becoming healthy. Vis-a-vis if it's a small child, starting or building a practice, so building a habit of doing things a certain way for a fresh, young, and a leaner organization is always a simpler journey. And it's a lesser investment in terms of time, but the returns are going to be much more bigger. But how much of foreseeing we are able to do for that is something which is the question that we were discussing a while ago.
Yeah. But do you think, Pallavi, I mean, ideal scenario is, from day one, someone has started a company, they start looking at it. Maybe not when you are 4 people, 5 people, but when you hit the 20 number. But do you think there is an ideal number where it sort of becomes like, if you don't start looking at it at this number of employees, then you will start, building these bad habits?
We have actually had some conversations with as smaller team as 4 founders sitting together and saying that, hey, we are going to start hiring, and these are like very enlightened and activated founders or humans, I would say, which makes them already question that what are the things that we should not be doing. So that means now that we are going to start our first hires, okay, what are the things that we can start putting in practice already? We don't want to say after hiring our 50th person and realize that, oh, all of us look alike. When I say look alike, that means that this is the same group that is
Correct.
coming in. How do we make sure that we are able to identify certain kind of subconscious hiring decisions that will affect 1 year down the line our hiring practices and the team composition? So as young as that, and the work is actually very less at that level. So there's no ideal team size, Abhash, I would say, because there's no age or dimension to this for an
Correct.
organization.
Correct.
However, um, However, what would be a good place to start if any founder or a startup leader is thinking when? Because everybody wants to know when, right? And to tell them as soon as possible or the day was already yesterday would also be a very ambiguous answer. So let's give them something specific. If right now you're already thinking that, okay, should I or should I not? That means you should. Okay, it's as simple as that, because there is something subconsciously already telling you that you should have done certain things, and the train already left the station, but don't worry, Springworks and Conduct are waiting for you on the next station. So we'll keep bringing the train, but it's never too late. There are companies which have been around for 20 years, like you were talking about, institutions who are uprooting the entire policy model that they have. Like we sit with 30, 40 policies of organizations, Abhash, and then we scan them from the DEI lens, and these are companies which are ready to approve. So I don't want to say this as a word of encouragement that, hey, don't worry, 20 years afterwards you will still be able to. But look at the trends and the reports wherein we are talking about how remote and global teams are becoming part of the workforce, how Gen Z is demanding what they want to be part of. And if you still want to be relevant next year, and the year is passing very quickly, if you still want
Yeah.
to be relevant as an organization next year, then this is the year when you start.
Got it. Got it. No, so where I was also coming from is, I mean, you've also started a company, so you will relate with this. In the initial days, you are essentially hiring from your network, right? So what you spoke about, everyone looks alike, is also because of the fact that people who know you, look like you, are the ones who are willing to take a bet on you, at least in the early part of your organization. So
No, absolutely. I hear you on that part, but I think one thing that person can be conscious of, which is what I was referring to, right? Lesser work at that level. The sooner you are starting, the lesser the work will seem like, and the lesser the effort will seem like. So sometimes just sitting with simple framework is why are we actually bringing this person beyond the complementary talent or the knowledge that is there. The culture fit understanding is also a little bit distorted whenever we talk about, right? Culture fit right now is assumed as somebody who will share the same jokes, with whom there will be lesser friction. Both Abhash and I have worked together in the past, and I will not have to spend time getting to know Abhash, right? So that's the time that I will save.
correct.
And we
Can I
already
go have a beer with you? That's the typical tech
Yeah.
bro retort sort of,
we know
right?
how to chill, we know how to have arguments, we know how to work with each other, we have the same work timings. I know Abhash also will be okay with this fast paced environment. So
Yeah.
lesser frictions is what we are looking for when we are doing initial hires. We just tell founders to ask one or two more questions, that if these are the lesser frictions, then what is going to be your work life? And is that the work life that, let's say, after your first 20 employees you will be able to keep replicating for your next 80, and then after your 100th employee you will be able to replicate the same work environment? Because if the answer is yes, go ahead. If the answer is no, then you need to ask yourself that, okay, how are we actually going to be as an organization, not as a company? So that distinction between what you are as a company and what you are as an organization, that is a quick exercise actually.
That's actually an interesting point. Alisha, now, we, of course, Pallavi mentioned it at the beginning. How do you measure all of this? Like I am super excited to hear that there is an objective way to measure this data. And,
Right,
especially coming from this tech background where we have to measure everything, right? There are things
right.
that should not be measured also that we measure, but how do we measure diversity and inclusion?
Right. So, very simply put, I think before we get to the data aspect, and obviously, data being the answer to this, we started off our conversation with all of this. One of the things that most organizations need to let go of is the fact that, diversity and inclusion is something that is standard and mandated across workplaces, right? Like, if it is the same for Springworks, it will be the same for Conduct. I think we need to break from that mold. We need to understand that no, this is not what it is. Number two, when you have access to this data or you're collecting this data, you will be able to realize, obviously you're taking the details of the person or you're taking the details of your employees, and you will be able to see patterns in this data, right? Like if you see that, let's say you're taking a survey, or you're, one of the questions in your survey is that are there too many sexist jokes in the workplace, and you will see that maybe the women are saying yes there are, and the men are saying no there are not, right? You will start identifying these patterns in the data. I think one of the things we are trying to do with Conduct is we are trying to show these patterns in terms of gender, in terms of age, that you need to start seeing this is the intervention or this is the pattern that is there. Once you have that pattern, right, you need to start understanding the intervention you're going to create. So if you see that there are more sexist jokes, building on the previous example, you need to know that okay, there needs to be an awareness session that needs to be done, right? Or I need to get my team together, tell them that give them a refresher on what is the appropriate workplace joke, or not appropriate workplace joke, but what is the appropriate workplace behavior, and how certain of our communication can be perceived in a different way by our organization or by other team members. So number one is obviously having access to this data, and I'm very happy to say that with Springworks, with Conduct, we are offering organizations that ability to get this data, whether it is through the pulse or whether it is through the analytics that Conduct does. So that is number one. You are able to see the patterns where you require intervention. And secondly, when you see this intervention, important to know that it's customized to your organization. So the data you get will be specific to your team members, and then the interventions that come will be customized to your organization. It's not like a one size fits all that will happen to everybody, or Springworks ungender same hi hai, so interventions will be the same. So when you have that data, start identifying the patterns. When you start identifying the patterns, the interventions start coming in automatically.
Got it. But how do you, when you say, of course, I understand it is customized, but there will be some sort of a benchmark, right? So how will you work with that? Like I'm just asking from the perspective of attendees. Of course, we will take attendee questions
Right.
as well.
Right. So I think one of the things we will see when we have data is there is a concept known as diversity heat map, right? What it shows us is that, let's take from the perspective of gender. What is this particular, for such, for a given situation, what do the men think? What do the women think? What is the intervention that is required? And I think in at what we do at Conduct is we are asking organizations, we are asking employees pretty straightforward questions and situations that they
Right.
face in the workplace every single day. So when a leader is actually looking at this data, or when a leader is looking at the answers that their team members have given, they it's very easy to assess what is right and what is not right. And at the same time, we present data in such a way that we are telling people that, hey, this is on the higher side, this is on the lower side. So as a product, our goal is to make this understanding of how your team is interacting, or of how your team is responding to certain situations much more easier, much more feasible for any leader who's looking at it. That is number one. Number two is also putting in the right sort of interventions. Like, for example, if you as a leader realize that your team is not using inclusive language, so obviously you will come back to us and you will say that, hey, what do I do about it? So in such a case, we are supplementing leaders with further steps they can take. For example, why don't you start your team on a conversation on inclusive meetings or inclusive language, how they can interact better with their colleagues. So this thing is something. One is, obviously there is a diagnosis. Think of it like a doctor, right? There is the illness that you have. You realize, you get a scan and you realize that, oh, hey, this is something that's there, and then you need to take a treatment.
Correct.
So breaking it down into three simple steps: you want to know the diversity matrix of your team. So you are doing that. You have data. Once you have data, what is the intervention that you take, to ensure that your teams are sort of building and working together in the same aspect. So this is a very simple breakdown that we follow at Conduct, and most of our organizations who have adopted Conduct customers are following it as well. So think of it that when you have data, you will need to sort of put in, and obviously we are more products and technologies now kind of aiding that.
Fantastic. Now we will get to the audience questions. I think we have 4 questions already. But before that, Pallavi, do we want to talk about the Springworks and Gender Pulse? Yeah, let's tell people how they can start doing it correctly.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead? Do you want me to do that?
Please go ahead. I can give some context on what we do at Springworks with Engage With, and then you can bring in the Conduct side of things. So of course we are in just to set some context, we are a HR tech company, so we build products and tools for the HR function, people ops, HR, whatever you want to call it. And one of the tools that we have is Engage With, which is a app for Slack and Microsoft Teams. Currently, it's an app for Slack and Microsoft Teams. At some point, we do want to build a web version as well. But what Engage With allows you to do is celebrate work as it happens and get a pulse of your organization. Right? So celebrate work as it happens, meaning instant recognition. So anyone who finds out that, if one of your colleagues went out of your way to deliver something, or, even not just your colleagues, by the way, it can be your manager, it can be the CEO. You want to do like a quick kudos or a recognition to them, which is typically, in an office setting, you just go tap on their shoulder and you're like, hey, thank you for that. But in a remote setting or even in a hybrid setting, that might not be possible. So you give a kudos, this goes to a public channel, and everyone sees that X has identified Y for their good work. The other more important part of what this tool does is it allows you to conduct pulse surveys, which is essentially, everyone here already knows, right? You might be sending long Google Forms type forms and such to people on your organization, and you have to do multiple follow-ups to just get them to fill that form, right? Whatever it could be, about psychological safety, like Alisha mentioned, or something else. But what we do with Engage With does with pulse surveys is we are able to do something we call a rolling pulse, which is essentially one question will go out to you within your Slack DM. So it becomes very easy to get responses. And what we have seen with us and the other people who use Engage With is, 70 to 80% of the employees respond within an hour, which is, we have spoken to several people and it's insane. And so now we are looking at how we can utilize this great tool that we have built that is able to get the pulse of the organization almost instantaneously, and work with, Conduct team and use it for your DEI initiatives. Now, Pallavi, you want to come in with how we are working with you to make this possible?
Oh, yes. Super excited for this thing. And all of us know at least how much work has gone behind behind the screen to make this happen. Challenging, very difficult thing, right? Getting to know what exactly is the status of the organization from so many different aspects in the fastest way possible. If I were to ask, all of the participants sitting here, last time you went for your annual health checkup, I have missed it out for 2 years already. Just saying that, because one, it's a very time-consuming activity. Second, it requires me to just drop everything else that I'm doing, go and sit in some clinic. I know they say they will come home and they will take it, and all that, but it's so divided that I still know that there's a lot of time and effort will go. And not more than once in a year or once in 2 years any one of us actually get it done. The same thing happens with whenever we think about DEI activities also, right? But the first and few things, the indicators, where I am, how well am I doing, or what is not working, is something that any one of us can quickly know. If I ask or if we ask everybody to just line up, do 10 push-ups, do a quick 100-meter sprint, do 10 squats, and very quick exercises which everyone will have time, everything will be over in 10 minutes. And then we don't even have to tell everyone, everyone will know that where they stand actually in what part, where the lungs are not working and where the legs are not working, and so on and so forth. That's what the pulse is, the most non-intrusive and yet the fastest way to quickly know where you stand is what our DEI pulse is about. And when I say non-intrusive, like you were you had already said, Abhash, right? When it's all visible, when you're asking everybody this question that, hey, we are doing this activity, we are doing this activity, it also kind of colors the responses that people give. I know because recently we asked some organization as part of the detailed analysis, and we asked them how many things that are deterring us from doing better in DEI, and almost 50% of the people in the organization said nothing. There's nothing that we are doing that is deterring her from us DEI activities. That means the organization must be amazing. The point here is that sometimes when you cloud people's understanding, you will also not get the real. This is what we are getting, a quick pulse, a quick assessment of where you stand, where we are doing great, where we can do better, and then say that, okay, do we want to walk this journey now? And very excited actually to look in, to see the first round of pulse coming in.
Yeah, excited for that as well. We will be rolling it out, and like I said, email, all the attendees will get the recording of the video, as well as how you can roll out a pulse survey in your organization very easily with Slack, Microsoft Teams. Now let us take questions. We have last 24 minutes, and I think we should be able to cover all the questions. Let me pick them up from, okay, I can just pick them up from here itself. So Megha's question comes first. With requirements list of staff, there is also concern around culture of entitlement. How would one address these aspects? A culture of entitlement means that employees arrogantly believe that they deserve a certain level of unreasonable privileges. Interesting.
I like how Megha also explained
Yeah.
the entitlement here for everybody's sake. Do you want to take this answer, Abhash, or shall I take a?
Oh yes, you two are the experts here.
All of us are experts here. I have a different theory on that, but coming to this,
I think this is a question of rights versus duties. Yeah, something of that sort. Yeah.
it is also, but you know what? I'm saying to Megha directly here. I think Megha, a lot of founders, leaders, organization, anybody who is in the position of creating something for somebody, this is a question that they're always thinking, whether it be of misuse or what if we start giving this, and then there are people, they will start asking for more. What if all these things will happen? The best of the organization, not companies. I always create a distinction between these two. The best of the organizations which you see people talking about, that even if they were part of them, those companies 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they've already left those organizations. When they talk about those organizations, is because everybody in that organization was building from the premise of trust.
Correct.
And that is something that each and every individual takes in with them. And when you start with the premise of trust, maybe one or two people will take this as an entitlement, or maybe they will say, they will anyway fiddle out from there. You know, they will not be able to stay in the organization, or they're not the crowd that you want to build this organization with.
Around.
And that's a safer stance to take, instead of worrying about what if I create this and somebody asks for more, or what if I create this and then somebody asks for more. I can't even imagine the kind of mental bandwidth it will take for somebody to constantly think about all
Yeah.
these things before you create something. So that's my blanket answer to any leader. Thankfully, every leader that we have spoken to has been able to understand and appreciate this, because I see the sigh of relief whenever we have highlighted this, and they're like, yes, we were thinking about all these things all the time. So that's a blanket and the simplest way to address it, actually.
Correct. Now that you said it, I also, bring up this quite a few number of times. Will not this policy be misused? And, Karthik always comes back with, let's optimize for the 95% who will not misuse it, right? That's who the policy is supposed to be made for. And there will always be people like 5% maybe who will misuse it. We can take that on a case to case basis, but we can't do the other way around.
Yes, and if you
Yep.
think that your people are going to misuse, then that puts a bigger question on the leader. What kind of people
Exactly.
have you actually been hiring? You
Yeah.
know? So just taking a jibe at it. But if you don't trust your people to not misuse, then that says something else about the way that we are hiring our people then.
Okay.
Right? So yeah.
Correct. I think Megha has added another question here. DI change management often gets frozen at middle management. Any thoughts how to work on the same?
That okay. Is it starting from middle management also, Megha? I'm just trying to understand. If you can quickly tell me. Because one DEI should never start from middle management.
Yeah. Megha, if you want to unmute yourself and talk, that's perfectly fine. Yes.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, super. So I think what I've seen is often that top management endorses such kind of changes, but often what I see is it's the middle layer, the middle managers or people managers, they kind of find it difficult to, kind of really roll it out at the ground level, at the frontline level, right? So there is often there we have to really compete for their interest and their attention, because there are a lot of initiatives in the organization, and I feel it often gets frozen there because they are the people actually who are working with the people managers. I hope I have
Yeah, I get it. I get it, Megha. Hey, thanks for asking two very pertinent questions. I hope the first one was answered in an adequate manner. For the second one, most of the time it gets frozen, and I know the reason why, because it doesn't matter whether it's starting from leadership or it's starting from middle management. The time from a mandate to become process and policy to it becoming culture in the organization. The culture part is where it's most painful, time consuming, and also the maximum number of investment that is required, which requires consistency. Giving you a small example, at the top level, people may say that, hey, let's talk about mental health, right? Because that's a prevalent conversation these days. Everybody seems to be talking about it and wants to care for it. At the board level, in the boardroom, you have given this a priority, then you created some mental health policy and leaves and everything. But when it starts translating from the middle management, if you have not sensitized all your people managers, if you have not had their buy-in on these conversations, if you have not given them the language of being able to talk about mental well-being, emotional health, psychological safety in workplace, or this freedom that today I can just walk into Alisha and I can say that, hey, Alisha, this is what has happened. I'm having another, let's say, anxiety attack, or I'm having another attack of, so and so. And at that point in time, how Alisha responds to me or accepts and has this communication with me is very important. So To make a mandate from a policy to a cultural experience, each and every person needs to be part of that transformation, that evolution of acquiring this language and empathy of whatever that is that we have taken as part of our mandate. That I agree does not happen. That's where internal capacity needs to be done. There are so many ways of doing it. If you don't have external people to come and actually do it all year around, and the bigger the organization, the more problematic it becomes. For leaner organization, as I have been saying till now, it's an easier thing to do because you have lesser people to put into these programs. You have lesser people to send this communication to. Second way of actually doing it is to actually break down these into nudges. Not everything has to happen in a classroom session. Not everything has to go through a 3 hour session. I mean, even this 1.5 hour, maybe 20% of what we have spoken about, you will remember. I hope it's more. But in any session, this is what happens. And we have to understand that these are the sessions which are once again coming as a mandate. Maybe nobody wants to sit and learn about mental health and language associated with it. So when these conversations are happening in the form of training, sensitization, and they will only happen as a one-time activity, the money that is spent and the time that is spent and not being able to continue it does more damage. So it's much better to actually break down, and this is where persuasive technology, and persuasive communication broken into bite-sized conversations called nudges is being adopted by various organizations to break down what exactly is the shift that you want your people to have and just send it to them at a regular. So consistency is the key here, not the length of the intervention, the one time session, but consistent communication is the key here.
Yeah. And I think that answers the last question as well. I was just going to answer it anyway, but I think that's exactly the answer to the last question, which is how would one get to know others' pronouns? Although my organization, a global banking firm, has option in the email signature template, but not seen employees using it largely. In such case, we may be addressing them incorrectly. How to handle this? I think, again, right, you have to keep pushing people to add those. It's not going to happen on one single day. Yes, Alisha.
No, I think on a personal level, just as a tip to everybody who's attending, if you do not know somebody's pronouns, I think it's best not to assume it. And if, let's say, I'm speaking to Abhash for the first time, and I want to address Abhash with the right pronouns, right? So I think as a practice, always declare your pronouns first. That hi, I'm Alisha, and my pronouns are she/her, and then you make the other person comfortable asking that what are your pronouns, right? So that is the easiest way to tell the person that hey, these are my preferred pronouns, and I'll be happy to know what your preferred pronouns are as well. I understand that they are part of email signatures, but sometimes you've not interacted with a person over email and you're directly meeting them in a call, or you're directly meeting them for something else. So in such a case, it can be a little difficult. But when you're meeting somebody for the first time, it's a good practice to ask people, hey, these are my pronouns, what are yours? And most people are obviously happy with that. I don't think that a lot of people will take offense to the fact that I'm asking you your pronouns. And if you feel that that is the case, you can always say that it'll help me address you better and address you with the pronouns you prefer.
Okay. Basudha asks, taking affirmative action requires investment in terms of money and time. I think we did touch upon this a little bit. A lot of organizations might see inclusion and diversity as a social responsibility. How do we see it in the context of profitability is, I think, the question.
Yeah, two ways of doing it actually. One, you can actually just pick up the narrative of most. Now go back to the company's part, like while the organization may be doing, because here we are talking about the return of the investment, right? Any organization that we see or any company, sorry, that we see which is doing fabulously well, you will see that there the diversity quotient, the diversity, equation is actually pretty high, and the diversity itself has been given weightage for the longest time, as long as that organization can now remember. And pick any successful company or the top out of the top 500 companies across the world, you can actually pick them and you will see that they have been talking about diversity for quite some time. That's more of a generic term, right, that they have done it, so there must be some merit in it. Second is, if you actually want to do it internally for your organization only, once you have been able to understand what I call them, we call them internally as part of our conducts language, we call these culture districts. Actually, basically, what it allows you to do is you will be able to map out what are the different functions, locations, which are doing fabulously well with respect to being efficient, the team productivity, there are lesser frictions, the tenure is higher of people, and the length is
Correct.
higher there, there's lesser attrition. All these things, if you put together, you will be able to see that whichever team is doing great on all these parameters, and each organization has certain parameters, but all of these eventually are leading to growth only, right? If in a team every 3 months or 4 months people are leaving, definitely I'm not going to be able to be productive in whatever it is that is the output of my team. That will give you another answer internally only, that what kind of investment is going towards keeping the scheme alive, what kind of output they are creating, and how much of time, which is equivalent to money, of course, effort is going wasted in making sure that this the internal culture of this particular function stays alive and thriving and is constantly growing, which internally a lot of organizations are doing. They're just not doing it from a structured sense. So sometimes when they see that, okay, the attrition is higher, nobody is asking themselves this question, that why is the attrition high in this particular function or in this particular area. So just going a little deeper on that, because expense is happening. Some expense is visible, some expenses that you are still not calculating for yourself. Not that time consuming activity if you have got the numbers and the intent right on this part, actually.
Cool. I think, oh, there is one last question that we will take and then we will close the conversation. Sharanya Ranganathan is asking, what role could the L&D function play in this context?
I think the most important role to initiate conversations in your organization is making sure that people are learning, and the learning and development function uh, is probably the most important function when you want to introduce diversity or inclusion mandates for your organization. I think there are a lot of things that are unknown, right? There are a lot of blind spots that organizations know exist, but they do not know how to communicate about it. And I think when you bring in that learning aspect, where you're telling people that, hey, you don't know about it, but you can learn about it, it removes judgment. That is one thing, right? From the minds of your employees, that I will not be judged for not knowing something. And at the same time, you're giving them that space for personal and professional growth, that I can come in, I can learn about it, and I will not be excluded for not knowing about it, or I'm not expected to learn about this on my own. So I think starting awareness is the most important aspect to start any conversations within your team. Like, your team members also may not know that they should be asking these questions if they want something from the organization. So when you start that conversation through awareness, you are also empowering them to come to you and communicate more efficiently about their requirements.
Can I
Fantastic.
also add to
Yeah,
this,
please.
Abhash, if I may?
Yes,
Can I?
please. Oh,
Yes.
yeah, please.
I think L&D, and I'm so glad, Sharanya, you're asking this, because not everything needs to be put under HR. I'm so glad how HR as a function and as a responsibility is evolving. And if I were to simplify this, um, if there are three eyes, that L&D could keep into consideration. Number one is individual or individuality, right? We can no longer assume or put people, throw them in classrooms and expect that learning will happen and learning should happen. This is what was happening with the earlier education system also. That is also something which is being debated. Each one has a different way of learning, each one has a different speed of learning, each one has a different methodology from which they will learn. So it's very important to, as much as possible, create that individual need and make it as part of whenever you're looking at creating any learning and development program, right? That's one. Number two is the innovation part. The reason I'm saying innovation is because for the longest time, classroom sessions were considered phenomenal. Then came now Zoom sessions. Now, then we are looking at combination of Zoom and classroom sessions. Then we have very bite-sized lessons and communication that can happen in people's inbox, or nudges that can be sent to them, or pop-ups that can be sent to them. There's so much that needs to be looked beyond than just thinking we have to get a session done. Let's not start with the we have to get a session, what we can do, but instead this is what we want our people to learn, how can we do it. So even when you are thinking of ways of doing it, from just starting with the premise of the traditional methodology, we have come a long way if we start looking at how much learning and development has evolved. And then the third part is intersectionality. You know, we have to understand that the minute we recognize the first I, and each and every person is going to be very unique, and any subject that you want them. So, for example, gender bias session are a failure. Okay, why? Because you cannot bring people to start learning about their biases and then only talk about the biases that they have for women or a cis woman. Okay, then don't call them gender bias session. Okay, because the minute you start talking about biases, make it more intersectional. Because if you're talking about the filter that we use when we look at people, how we perceive them, how we engage with them, how our micro communication affect these things in workplace, have a more holistic and bring the intersectionality of these engagements in the workplace, so that by the time your people have walked out of whatever format that you used, to conduct or to deliver this particular learning and encourage this development, you would have more friends than people who would be turned off or put off by these sessions, because you were considerate enough to think about the intersectionality of these topics. And these three eyes is what I would suggest, that every time you're thinking what you want your people to learn and develop, if you can sit down with this exercise, that will go a long way in creating something which will have a multifold output than compared to not spending time on doing this.
Fantastic. I think those are all the questions. Nothing else has come up. Perfect. Yeah, great time. I always do a bunch of podcasts as well. And whenever I come out of a conversation learning something new, and by the way, here I think 90% of the things were new to me, what I heard from the both of you. So that's a great outcome, right? There can't be a better outcome for your time. I hope that is the case for most of the attendees as well. I think some people have left because they have another call, but I think 60% retention at the end of a 1 hour 26-minute session is fantastic. So thank you so much, Pallavi and Alisha. Folks, if you liked the session, just put a thank you in the chat. I don't think, if we were in a face-to-face setting, you would have said thank you. So maybe do the same thing on the chat as well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing it. Like I said, we will share the recording of this session over email, and we will also tell you how you can use Engage with Pulse to use to do a DEI pulse survey within your organization that we have built in collaboration with Conduct. Thank you so much, everyone. That's it. And good. And what's great is we are finishing 3 minutes before time. That rarely happens in these sort of sessions. So we have saved everyone 3 minutes of their time.
Everyone.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.